Hey, what's going on, everybody? PojiForce here. You're watching PojiForce Plays, and welcome back to Dead by Daylight. The PTB for Chapter 21 is upon us, and with it comes a slew of changes from a new ranking system, updates to cosmetics and other visual changes, a buff to Nemesis, and most importantly, a brand new licensed killer. Meet the Cenobite. The Cenobite is from the 1987 movie Hellraiser and is better known to the world as Pinhead, a hellish sadomasochist who arrived on Earth through a portal opened through a mystical puzzle box. I've been hearing from a few different people that this killer is actually really strong. Perhaps too strong. I'm a survivor main who also plays a fair bit of killer, so while a strong killer isn't unwelcome, I begin to grow concerned that this killer could be overpowered and thus very unpleasant to play against. So in one of my recent live streams on Twitch, I decided to put the PTB through its paces and experience this killer both as a survivor and as the killer itself. All the footage you're about to see is taken from that live stream, though a disclaimer, while I was able to get plenty of experience as a survivor playing against the sadomasochistic Pinhead, I was only able to get 2 games playing as the killer itself. It stands to reason that when the biggest thing about this PTB is a brand new killer, a lot more people are going to be playing killer than usual, and so killer queue times were way too long. I think it takes this long to get into a match. God. I did get enough experience with him that I think I can still share my thoughts from the killer's perspective. So let's get to it. The Cenobite comes with 3 unique perks as well as a new power. His power is called Summons of Pain. This power has a lot going on with it, but can essentially be broken down into 2 things. His Possessed Chains, and the Lament configuration. The Possessed Chains is an active ability where Pinhead first creates a portal, and then from the perspective of the portal, creates a controllable chain that if it hits the survivor, will hook them with several chains to a maximum of 3, that prevents the survivor from sprinting, and progressively slows them down for each chain attached. While connected to chains, survivors cannot perform any action other than moving, but can perform an action to break them. Okay, I guess I can't pull a pallet when I'm chained up. That's a little weird. The Lament configuration is the mystical puzzle box itself, and it will appear in random locations around the map. While the survivors can see the aura of the Lament configuration, Pinhead cannot without the help of add-ons. As the match progresses, a gauge will fill on the survivors, not unlike the sleep gauge for the Nightmare. If the gauge fills fully, all survivors scream, revealing their location, as something known as the Chain Hunt activates. During the Chain Hunt, chains will continue to attack the survivors automatically for several seconds, making most actions impossible until either the Chain Hunt ends or the survivors activate the Lament configuration. They do this by first picking the puzzle box up, which itself counts as a held item and replaces any held item by the survivor. Once the survivor picks up the Lament configuration, it is impossible to drop it until it is solved, and the survivor carrying it is indicated on the UI. This survivor will also be afflicted with the Oblivious condition, and chains will regularly pester this survivor until they solve the puzzle queue. It's a series of simple skill checks to solve, but while solving it, Pinhead can easily teleport to the person attempting to solve it. This temporarily binds the survivor in place, and then the Lament configuration is removed.
You opened the box. I came.
If Pinhead himself finds the Lament configuration instead of the survivors, he can activate a Chain Hunt early. Alright. He just activated a Chain Hunt. Whether the Lament is successfully solved, Pinhead teleports to the survivor solving it, or Pinhead picks it up himself. The Lament configuration disappears and reappears later somewhere else in the trial. His 3 unique perks are Deadlock, Hex Plaything, and Scourge Hook, Gift of Pain. Deadlock blocks the generator with the most progress for a maximum of 30 seconds whenever another generator is completed. The block generator is highlighted white for the killer during this time. This is better than it may sound, and came into play several times when I was the survivor. Wow, that's annoying. You could also see this working with perks like Pop Goes the Weasel to protect a generator until you arrive to contest it. Hex Plaything is a new Hex perk that doesn't actually appear until the first time a survivor is hooked. The first time you hook a survivor, that survivor becomes cursed, and Hex Plaything lights up a dull totem somewhere in the trial. The cursed player is rendered oblivious for the rest of the trial until a Hex Plaything is cleansed. The survivor who is cursed can see the aura of Hex Plaything within 24 meters, and the other survivors cannot cleanse it for 90 seconds. This perk may seem powerful, being essentially a hidden hex that renders one survivor unable to hear you coming, but in practice it didn't seem all that impactful. I personally never became cursed in all my survivor games, and in the killer games where I used it, the survivors basically ignored it. An interesting perk that seems like it will encourage survivors to do totems more, but doesn't seem to make the killer any more of a threat. His last perk, Scourge Hook Gift of Pain, looks like a new type of killer perk that we might be seeing more of in the future. When used, 4 hooks in the trial become Scourge hooks and are highlighted to the killer in white. A survivor who is unhooked from a Scourge hook suffers from the mangled and hemorrhage status effects, and if they heal, they are afflicted with a 7% debuff to their repair and healing actions until they are injured again. I probably should have just stayed injured at that, actually. That probably would be more valuable to me. Stayed a hair from healthy, and then when I feel like... This perk seems really strong if you can reliably use your Scourged hooks. It seems to complement Thanatophobia really well, where a survivor could potentially be afflicted with a debuff regardless of whether they are healthy or injured. I noticed the effects of this perk a lot in my survivor games, and as the killer, navigating to a Scourge hook in time wasn't terribly difficult. I can see this one being popular once it goes live. So how does Pinhead play? Since most of my experience was as a survivor, we're going to start by evaluating the Cenobite from the survivor's perspective. His actual powers seemed difficult to gauge at first. The first game was a 4-man escape with the killer DCing as the gates opened. Alright, let's get this gate open and leave. And he rage quit. The second game was a 4-kill on Haddonfield. Experienced DB players will know that Haddonfield is one of, if not the strongest map for survivors. Oh, that was a good run. That was a good run. Really impressive killer with the right perks. The chain harvest or chain hunt, whatever they want to call it. So you could say his threat level ran both ends of the scale. The very first thing I noticed about Pinhead, though, playing against him was his terror radius, or you could say lack thereof. Interesting terror radius music, it's very quiet. This has been a very quiet game with his like non-radius terror radius. His mild disturbance radius. He has a very quiet low energy terror radius and chase music, and it makes it very difficult to tell if he was nearby or not, or even if he was actively chasing you. The chains, while debilitating, weren't as oppressive as I thought they would be. While the slowdown isn't insignificant, you can still move while breaking chains, and the break action isn't all that long. So if Pinhead is far enough behind when you get chained down, you can still break all chains and continue chase without immediately getting hit. The skill checks on the Lament configuration weren't difficult, and solving the puzzle itself doesn't take all that long, though Pinhead can make it take longer with add-ons. If he teleports to you, he doesn't necessarily appear close by, which means you can still potentially navigate to a loop or safe place once he teleports. The chain hunt itself isn't too oppressive, and the chains are fairly easy to dodge while moving, but it does make doing generators or other sustained activities basically impossible for the duration. A lot of chains. Pinhead himself is wearing solid black clothing that blends well with dark maps, but his bright white skin and tall, upright stature ironically make Pinhead most noticeable to the survivors by his pinhead. So within sightlines, Pinhead isn't really a killer that you won't see coming. In the end, as a survivor, because of the lament configuration, I ended up viewing this killer as a proactive blend of the pig and the nightmare, because the chain hunt affects everyone eventually, like the nightmare's sleep, and it produces an object in game that survivors have to interact with to prevent disaster, like pigs reverse bear traps. The survivors need to be mindful of the chain hunt to avoid giving Pinhead free map-wide slowdown and information, and so at some point someone needs to go open the box.
I saw you with the box. What was in the box?
Because Pinhead can teleport to the person solving it, this also often means that this person is going to be taking over chase. This can even be used as a means of distracting or baiting Pinhead away, by running in the opposite direction, where a teammate might be going for an unhook or working on a generator before attempting to solve the cube. We can use that. I just realized that that's a good bait.
You open the box.
That's a good bait. Wow. If you can coordinate like that, that's a great bait. You bait him to the other side of the map. You know where he's at. This does require some degree of coordination, and in solo queue teams, I could see this being difficult depending on what sort of players you end up being teamed up with. But in the end, that's depending on the skill of the survivors and not really the power of the killer. Personally, it felt rather fun to play against because of this added element of needing to proactively mitigate his power, where it basically served as an additional mechanic of the trial. Kind of like having to wind the Jack in the Box in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. As a survivor, I can see matches against Pinhead being fun, yet challenging. And we're both out. Job well done! I didn't think I would make it. Whoa! Now playing as the killer, I learned rather quickly that his possessed chains can be rather difficult to figure out. The UI indicators for button presses can trick you into canceling his power, and while the chains are fast and mobile, they can be difficult to navigate. It took some tinkering around in private games with my friend, King of Games, to really figure out how the possessed chains work. One interesting thing I learned is that when you're preparing to fire the chains from the portal, you can still move around your camera, changing the angle from which you fire. Which means that depending on where you place your portal, you can scout behind objects or cover, and also hit survivors with chains who are hiding in these areas. Pinhead is uncontrollable during this time though, so you still have to be quick or any slowdown gained from hitting that survivor with chains will ultimately be a waste due to lost distance. Currently though, there is a rather weird bug involving the chains where one chain won't let go of a survivor no matter what. This can be really frustrating for the survivor affected by it, but does lead to some hilarious side effects. Interesting. That's interesting. Well, that very interesting. Alright. We're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna switch to his, turning add-ons.
Shall tear your soul apart.
Okay. Well, that was interesting. Playing as the Pinhead, I never found the lament configuration, but I found that ignoring it is fine for Pinhead, as either you're going to get a chain hunt that makes things easier to you as the killer, or someone is going to open it, meaning that if you're currently not chasing someone, you get to freely appear near a survivor. Even after grasping how his chains work, they're somewhat difficult to control, and it's easy to fall into a bad habit of trying to use them over pallets or windows. Doing so means that all the slowdown from the chains is effectively lost when you have to circumnavigate that obstacle. This is an ability best used quickly, whilst in the mid to close range chase to slow down the survivor just enough that they can't reach safety in time and secure the hit. The portal may ignore walls and solid objects when being placed, but the chains themselves do not, making indoor maps not this killer's friend. Multi-level maps also seem to come with some unexpected complications, as at least one time I had his portal fall through the floor. Oh, that was not... what that? That was weird. His lunge is difficult to gauge, but seems decent. And he's as fast as most killers with an equally large terror radius, although again, that is deceiving based on how difficult it is to determine his distance based on how quiet his terror radius is. Not sure if that's a bug or not. Also, players seem to really enjoy being moried by the Pinhead for some reason. Oh wow, that'd be pretty incredible, wouldn't it, if his Mori ripped them apart? Steve shouldn't have left. If he hadn't have left, I wouldn't have gotten the Mori. In the end, I would say this killer has the potential to be very, very strong, but that strength relies on the killer's skill at firing off chains quickly and accurately, and at the right times. And while the chain hunt is a very strong source of slowdown and scouting, it's also an ability with automatic counterplay built right into it that skilled, coordinated teams can easily work around, while still giving Pinhead some value by allowing him to use the limit configuration himself or teleporting to the survivor who is. My final take on this killer: he's a strong killer with a very unique ability that encourages proactive play from the survivors and requires skill from the killer player to really make him shine. All in all, I'd say the Cenobite is very fun, very well designed. It's both fun to play as and against. Barring a few tweaks to remove bugs and perhaps increase the volume and intensity of his terror radius, I'm very much looking forward to playing as and against the Cenobite when he goes live. Hey everyone, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are on Pinhead and this new chapter for Dead by Daylight. Sorry that this video was so late, but hopefully it was enjoyable for you. And stay tuned for future videos. And until then, everyone, I am PoGForce, and you all stay awesome. I'll catch you later.